welcome in to the Missouri Aquarium Society Get to Know Your Speaker Series. I am here with the world famous Gary Lange. Gary, how you doing tonight, man?
Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. I am so excited to have you on tonight. So, unfortunately, Joe had a couple of life things come up. Joe Faszl was supposed to be our speaker, but we are super blessed to be very deep in talent with our club, and Gary was happy to help out and step in. Gary, I noticed that when we were getting warmed up, you didn't have that hat on, making sure
Yeah,
you repping the Cardinals.
yeah, this is what I just wanted to say to everybody that's listening. I am getting so doggone tired of this stupid COVID stuff. It is driving me crazy. I
Yes.
want to go to the Cardinal game. I want to see that
Yes.
stuff. I want to take the stupid mask off. I want to see you guys again. It's this stuff is getting crazy, but there's a lot of people getting sick out there. So this was my biology background. This is what I did in college, learning about microbiology and virology. So keep your mask on. We've got another 3 or 4 months. This probably isn't going to be over to May, but bear with us. Eventually, we'll be able to get back and go to the Cardinal
Yes.
games, the football games, and all the
And
other cool
most
stuff.
importantly, aquarium meetings.
MASI, yes, and all the
Someday.
other things. I can't tell you how many things I've lost this year. I was a trip to Canada. I was going to Germany. The Germany trip in June probably this year's probably going to be off, and next year I was supposed to go to Papua again, and that's gonna be off. So
Yeah.
it's just a bummer. Oh, there's a nice show in Pennsylvania that I had to miss. So it's just
Four,
been
at
yeah.
least.
It's
I
just
mean, not
it's
to mention all the
yeah
day-to-day stuff and
yeah
the
yep
regular
exactly
meetings and
yeah
the
yep
auctions and
exactly. So it stinks. So guys, just hang in there, and we'll eventually get
oh,
there.
gross. There's a Cubs fan in here.
Oh, hey, Cubs are Cubs. So, Wally,
Uh,
Wally, Wally Kern. My God, I haven't heard from you in ages. Wally Kern. We always have people that go, my fish is this. I got to get on the camera side. This big. My fish is this big. Wally had no frickin' lie. He had an 18-inch Altum. He had a 200-gallon aquarium that was 24 inches tall. I was taking a dollar bill because a dollar bill is 6 inches, and I was going. So Wally Kern, I saw that name flash by. He had the biggest Altum that I have ever seen. He had a couple of them in that tank. They would just drag the gravel when they were swimming. They were
wow.
such huge. They were enormous. I wouldn't have believed it. And my I could get back far enough to take a picture. That was back in the slide days. So that was pre 2000 or something like this. My camera, I could get back far enough with that fixed lens to take a picture of the fish. It was just so fantastic. So, I like a lot of other fish besides rainbows, but maybe in another life I'll come back and do a Central American cichlids or something like that. So
Hey,
let's go from
real
there.
quick, guys, if you are on Facebook and you are commenting, make sure to add your name to your comment so that we know whose it is, because otherwise it just comes in with nameless, kind of like this. I'm pretty sure I know who this is. I bet that's Steve, my buddy Steve Goldstein there. But yes, so if you're on Facebook, make sure to add your name to your comments. All right. Wally Kern says that he still has a VCR of your rainbow fish talk from 25 years ago. The question is, Wally, do you still have a device to play that on?
Yeah, those are
Uh,
kind of hard to find.
so Gary, let me kind of get started, and so tell me, how did the legend himself get started in fish keeping?
Well, I was 5 years old. I was lived in St. Louis City, and we lived in a flat. I was upstairs with my parents, and my maternal grandparents, mother was downstairs. At 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning, she got up really early all the time for her job. On Saturday, she was off. I'd come downstairs, watch cartoons, and help her clean her fish tanks. She had an over/under, a 29-gallon on top and a 20 on the bottom, and I played with that for several years, which helping her change fish water. At the time back in the Axelrod days, they would sit there and say, change 10% of the water. And she said, Gary, fish pee in that water. We're changing 50%. So I'd take the little bucket and we'd dump that thing into the toilet and we'd go back and forth. And then we'd sit around and, watch cartoons and have a good old time. It was a great, great way to have a grandmother around, and my other grandparents were just 3 houses up. That went on for about 3 or 4 years. That was great until we moved to the suburbs.
Did
But
you guys
but that was my start.
did they have water? Did they have dechlorinator back then?
Oh yeah, we had dechlorinator back then. It was called Water Right. It sort of neutralized the water, so it gave you a pH 7 pretty quickly. So even
Really?
though our water comes out, you can still buy Water Right. It's not a very good product to put in our water in St. Louis though, because we've got such we've only got 2 degrees kH in our water, so it
Right.
goes acid very, very quickly. So you really don't want to put any neutralizer in there. You might want to put some buffer in there, like sodium bicarbonate, but you don't want to take anything away from that.
Yeah.
But that's how I started. And then I was busy with college. I took my tanks down. When I came back, I was at Jewish hospital working, and one of the ladies across the hall was talking about fish again, and I said, "Oh wow!" She gave me a couple of convict cichlids of all things, and I had some fun with a lot of the fish, and put them back in the aquariums that I had. And he said, "You know what? There's an aquarium club. There are nuts like you that actually have this thing." I joined MASI. Gosh, I think it was about 1980, 81, something like that. And
Just a few years before I was born.
yeah, yep, yeah, yeah. You old timer. I gotta dye my beard or something, or put some hair on there. But that's how that started. And then our BAP chairperson, um, she came up to me one day because I had spawned a couple rainbows and said, "Look at this book." And it was I really forgot to grab that prop, but it was a book by Jerry Allen, and it was these exotic rainbow fish. And in the inside cover was a centerfold of a big yellow rainbow fish called
Mhm.
Melanitania Herbert axelrod. And I said, "Oh my God, I've got to get this thing." And they weren't at Belts, which is the world's famous aquarium at the time on the side of the Mississippi. They weren't there. I finally found it. It was the editor of Tropical Fish magazine was listing those in something called the American Rainbow Fish Association, a little pamphlet. So that was my first trip. I had, I really went crazy trying to get these fish, go to the post office at the airport to get these things in, and that's how it started, and it was madness ever since then. I had a lot of fish tanks and everything, was going with a lot of fish. We had conventions out in California. We had conventions on the East Coast. So we had a lot of conventions. And in 2003, this missionary named Dan Doherty came through town. He lives in Papua, and which is part of New Guinea that I visited. And he was there trying to recruit pilots. He said, "Hey, you've got the fish that's named for me. Can I show these pilots? Come over and show these pilots these fish." And I said, "Oh yeah, sure. Come on over." And he came over, and then we got to be pretty good friends. And a few years later, he was coming through town again with his son. They were college shopping, and went out to lunch. And about a week later, he called me up and said, "Hey, I've got some time in May. Would you like to come collecting in New Guinea?" And it's like, oh, I turned into a little girl and screamed and yelled and screeched and everything. And it was just like, yes. And I said, "But I'll have to ask the boss first." And the boss looked at me and said, "Yeah, you're probably going to divorce me if I don't say yes." So my brother said, "Hey, get $1 million policy on him and let him go." So
Genius.
yeah,
So do
yeah.
you
So
remember what I was thinking? So I know like there's generally a certain fish that kind of like catches your attention as a child that like really kind of enthralls you. For me, it was the neon tetra. Do you remember back when you were changing your mom's fish tank water? If there was a certain fish that kind of just got you hooked?
there was a lot of fish that she had. She had the blue gouramis, and she had the angelfish. She didn't like the angelfish though. It was so funny because my aunt had given her some neon tetras for her
Hmm.
birthday, and she put them in with the really big angelfish, and they became very expensive fish food pretty
Yes,
quick. So
yes, I
so
do.
those angelfish, they were mean. She'd get in there and say, "Stop beating on those other fish and picking on the other fish." They were
Yeah.
doing what angelfish were doing.
Oh yeah.
And she had huge silver dollars too. She had silver dollars that were probably 4 inches tall
No kidding.
for a
In a
29
29?
gallon. Yeah, a
Wow.
29-gallon tank. But I realized, oh hey, you can't put plants in that tank. That's one of those things you
Yeah, they
realize
get
pretty quick.
devoured.
But when you're doing 50% water changes at least once a week, those fish grow big. And she fed just like she tried to feed the kids all the time. Eat, eat, eat. You know what you, you know, a 6-year-old can't eat 2 pork chops. What's wrong with you?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Is that sort of thing. So those were fish that I enjoyed. But it took quite a bit later that when I was at Missouri Aquarium Society before I actually looked at rainbow fish. Before that, at Missouri Aquarium Society, I did a lot of the exotic swordtails, so high fin swordtails, the double swordtails, and all that sort of stuff. And then I end up falling in love with Corridor's catfish too. I was the first person in MASI to spawn 5 catfish, even though Ralph Wilhelm, the late Ralph Wilhelm, had done a lot of catfish and quarries. I actually turned in 5 before he did, so ha ha ha.
Nice, very nice.
But then rainbows came along, and the rest is history.
So was it that trip to Papua New Guinea that just kind of cemented your love for rainbows in there, or was it before that?
Oh, I way before that, I had really.
Okay.
I started the Rainbow Fish Study Group back in, 1987 or 1989. So there are people that, we've gone around to conventions and all that.
What was it about them that kind of got you hooked on them?
Well, this is politically incorrect to say, I think, but it's the people in Australia that said it. So I'm quoting them or misquoting them. They called them the dumb blondes of Sahul. Sahul is the country of Australia and New Guinea together when the land masses were connected, and because they'd say these fish are so beautiful, but gosh darn, they're so dumb. So please don't all the blonde people come after me. At one time, I used to be blonde too when I was younger, but now I've grayed. But it really is true. Those colors that they have, and rainbow fish do really cool things because they'll get a flash, and I'll show that in some of the pictures on Thursday. It's like there's a fluorescent light from the tip of their nose to their first dorsal fin, and they'll turn it on and off like a flashlight. It's just really kind of cool to see that work out. So that's kind of one of the things, and they're always moving. A friend of mine once said a rainbow fish is like they've all on cappuccino because they're running around the tank, bumping back and forth. You can see I've got some of the old guys behind me in the tank behind me. That's a 7-foot tank, so they move a little bit slower in there. But when they get going, when the lights first turn on in the morning, they're just crazy.
You were the first person to actually describe that spawning, like that early sparring and spawning, early morning sparring and spawning behavior from rainbows. And after you mentioned that, I went out early one morning. I had some rainbow fish in a tub for the summer, just to see if they would spawn for me some praecox, and I got to see a pretty cool light show. They were like, you described it as pulsating, and I was like, you mean just like they're shimmering because the light's hitting them? No, they're actually pulsing their colors. It is really wild. I had no idea you could do that.
You start looking for a battery on them. Where are these guys? They're plugged in because they're just amazing. So
seriously, absolutely breathtaking. We have our first question, and guys, you are welcome to ask questions. I will put it up on the screen like this, and we will talk to Gary about it. So I
just realized that my shirt's not showing. This is an old MASI shirt from years ago with the darter and all the cool stuff on there. All I see is the white shirt. So
hey, look at this. Before we get to this question, someone came here to say hi to me instead of you.
All right.
All right. It says, can I ask a totally random, I'm going to try and pronounce that username there. Can I ask a totally random question about English language? Just trying to figure out if I can use the word sandal to refer to the wood sandalwood, oriental tree, very aromatic wood. Would that be correct? So I'd be curious as to where you're from. Av of Abiom Morim. Yeah, sorry. But sandal to refer to the word, I'm assuming you mean like for short.
No, you'd always call it sandalwood.
You wouldn't call it
because a sandal is something that you wear on your foot. So sandalwood is a very aromatic wood. When we were in Pagai one time, we were just getting ready to get on the or a plane had landed, and the guys had brought, I don't know, it was 100-pound bag of sandalwood. We grabbed a few pieces from them, and it really is very strong. They make incense and maybe even perfumes out of them, but unfortunately they're pretty much ripping up the forest, looking for these plants in Papua. So I know that's a problem in Papua. So I am familiar with sandalwood, but it does smell good. But I would always call it sandalwood, not sandal.
Yes, and perfectly said. If you guys are trying to post something, post a comment, you'll need to make sure that you are logged into your YouTube account. If you're watching on YouTube, if you just try to comment from without being logged in, it will not let you do that. But once you log in, you'll see the chat and you'll be able to type your comments in.
This is your last chance to get some questions in, man.
That's right.
Otherwise, too
That's right.
bad.
We're not taking any questions on Thursday. No, I'm kidding. So, Gary, I had a question for you. Right now, what are some of the fish that I'm looking at behind you?
Okay, so I've got some Denisoni barbs. Those are the things with the bright red stripes.
Yeah,
And then the other ones are rainbow fish. And I really don't remember which rainbow fish I have there. So
that
I've
is
got
quite a tank.
Bozemanii in there. That bright red one that's coming there. That's a Goiter River one. That big plant in the center. That's a Crinum calamastratum. That's about an inch in. That's about a 2-inch in diameter thing. I've got a bunch of babies if anybody's interested in St. Louis. Let me see, what else do I have in there? I've got a couple of, I get some old males, and then I've got some other ones that are getting kind of decrepit. I just a lot of those, if they're beyond breeding, I will go and throw them in that tank just because I say I can't kill that fish. So you might even see some humpback fish in there. It's like, you know what, rainbow fish live 15
Yeah,
years,
you got a
and
cold tank.
if they've done some good things for me, I can't say, oh, I've got to get rid of them. So
Yep,
don't
yep.
want to do that.
I understand. What size tank is that? It looks massive.
It's a 210. So what it is 7 foot, which is a horrible tank to get. Get
Yeah,
yourself a 6-foot tank or an 8-foot tank, just because it's easier to light, and it's 7 foot by
yes.
2 foot by 2 foot. So it's a lot of
That's a lot of water.
space, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot. They're a lot of fun, and I at one time I had 600 watts of power compacts on there. Now I've got 200 200 watts of LEDs on there right now, and I added a few more just so it would show up a little bit brighter
That is a lot of
for this talk. So
LED wattage right there,
yeah,
man.
yeah.
Now, not everyone, you're famous for rainbows. Not everyone knows that you're quite the accomplished horticulturist as well. You produce a lot of plants in your fish room. How many tanks would you say you run CO2 in?
I guess I've got in about 8 or 10 tanks. So um, I had some devices at work called high performance liquid chromatography devices, and they had to be degassed with helium. So you'd get all of the air out of your liquid buffers. And if you didn't do that, you had a horrible, messy thing. Well, when they were tearing those down, they had all these little needle valves that you adjusted these three things with. And so I brought those home, and I've got multiple needle valves, so I can do multiple tanks with it, because normally a needle valve and and all the stuff would
Okay.
cost you 50, 60, $80 a piece.
Quite a
So
bit.
I use those, but I don't use a lot of CO2. I just use a little bit, because a little bit is just like medium light, and a little bit of CO2. A lot of times that keeps the algae at bay. It doesn't kill algae, but the plants grow
Right.
better, and the plants then the algae can't use the nutrients in their water. The plants use them.
Right.
So I just use a little bit of CO2.
So how many like CO2 canisters do you have? Because you said you're splitting your CO2, right?
Right. I've got two in the main fish room, and then one out here for this tank, because this tank is about 15 foot away from the main fish room. So
Gotcha.
it has to have its own one. So,
Very
and
nice.
they run dry a little bit quicker when you do that. But I've also get the big ones. They call them 20-pounders. They're actually 40 something when they're full. They're really heavy, but they're about 24 inches tall. So they're pretty good size tanks. And I would recommend to everybody, because just get yourself a 20-pounder instead of a 10-pounder, because the 10-pounders run out a lot quicker. Um,
Yeah.
and they're about $2 more to fill. So it's they're harder to hide, but if and tie them down somewhere too. You don't want a toddler knocking them over. They're not going to blow up and go across the room like a helium tank, but because they're liquid.
Yeah.
But you definitely don't want to, not leave them tied down.
Yeah, that would stink.
Yeah.
Now, Gary, you mentioned your fish room. There's several fish room tours, several of your fish room tours out there, just kind of on YouTube that have been done by other channels. Uh, how many fish rooms have you built at this point in your life?
Really, just one. I haven't moved from this. Once I got into this house, I haven't moved. They're gonna have to, carry me out on a stretcher or whatever.
Yeah.
But I had the one. The one. It's part A and part B really, because I had a fairly small fish room, but the one wall that I put in,
Hmm.
I glued it to the foundation, to the floor, because I said one day, instead of taking nailing into the concrete, I said one day I might expand that. So I have essentially doubled the size of my fish room later, and in that side, all I did was use pretty much 40-gallon breeders, and then a couple of 4-foot tanks that are, I guess there's 6 4-foot tanks in there. So
Yeah.
bigger tanks. Smaller tanks are on the original side. I used to be a killifish guy too at one time, so I had all these little bitty tanks stacked 5 high and
Yeah.
5-gallon tanks and all that jazz. So
We got a question coming in from Wally Kern here. Wally says, question. Speaking of plants for either Jake or Gary, is there a difference in using glass tops or acrylic for plant growth? So I'd say I don't know the difference between glass and acrylic. Do you?
no, I really don't. And if you mean acrylic, are you talking about the greenhouse plastic, or the plexiglass? Because plexiglass bends, so after a while it absorbs water, and all of a
Right.
sudden you'll get this
Starts to
going like
sag.
this, and it also doesn't support lights. So if you've got a light attached above it in the rack or something, that's one thing. But the acrylic, the plexiglass bends. There is the other word for plexiglass. It's a more expensive plexiglass when you go to Home Depot.
Hmm.
Um, right now I forget what it is, but it's actually, if you make it thick enough, it's bulletproof also. So that stuff
In case
that
you ever
stuff
need to
doesn't.
shield the
Yeah,
top of your aquarium
yeah,
from bullets.
yeah. That stuff does well. They use it at places that need to be bulletproof, quick shops in slum areas or something. But that stuff does not bend, and you get the thin stuff. Reason I know that is I've got a little breeder rack in the other room that has little 2 liter, 3 liter tanks that I'm just raising up baby rainbows in. And I put these little acrylic. I took all the scrap plexiglass I had around, and I cut it to fit for lids, because even little fish jump out. And the plexiglass was all bending. Even a 3-inch wide lid was bending. So I have to replace it with um, the other stuff. And again,
Yeah,
there's 2 types at Home Depot, and the one type that's more expensive, that's the stuff you want.
yeah,
Unfortunately, like everything in life.
that's
So
true. Now I do know this, Wally. He says polycarbonate question mark, and he also says he was thinking of greenhouse plastic for tops. I was going to say on the original question, um, I know that if you're asking, Wally, are you asking about using glass tops and acrylic tops versus no tops? Um, because I do know that one of the drawbacks with having glass tops and trying to grow plants at the same time is you're adding another barrier of reflective surface between you and your light. And so generally, if you want to achieve a certain light level, you'll need to bump it up just a little bit more to deal with your glass top. And also, your glass top is going to begin to get algae and some calcium buildup as well. And unless you're like very methodical about it, you can kind of throw your tank uh, into a bit of chaos like every now and then if you allow that calcium and the algae to build up quite a bit and then clean it all off at once, because your plants adjust to that lower light setting of being shielded by that algae and that calcium. And when you shave it all of a sudden there's a big a light boom, and then you might get some he just followed up. You might get a little bit of algae bloom in that. He says no, just comparison between glass and plastic. I would assume glass would be superior in that it's just going to be easier to clean and easier to maintain than plastic would.
Yeah, I think so. And the greenhouse plastic that people are using also, I think a lot more of that light doesn't get through than it
Hmm.
does with clean glass. So just looking at the stuff, it looks pretty cool because I mean it's strong enough that I think you could almost stand on the stuff. It's pretty
Yeah.
strong, but I just don't think it gets enough. Remember, when you measure, I remember when Karen Randall was talking about par values in a stream, and when you're outside in the tropics, it's really hot. Really, the par value is like 10 or 15 times what you can do with the best LEDs
Hmm.
outside than it is inside. So a greenhouse, if they get a little bit of reflection, they're fine with that. But for us, we want to get as much light as possible. With 90 tanks, so if you don't have lids on them, you're going to rot your house. I saw a guy in Indianapolis that actually did that. The late Al Anderson did that to his house. He had black rot all over the place because he didn't have lids on his tanks, and it just really messed up his basement and
Brutal.
the top part of his house. Yeah, so don't do that.
All right, let's see. Going back a little bit, Molasses, nice name. Molasses put in a comment. He says, "To me, praecox remains the most beautiful aquarium fish. I received my first batch from Gary back in 1994. And Gary, before I actually met you, I had heard your name all over the place attached to your strain of praecox. So you have quite the following on your praecox strain there." Molasses also
Oh,
says,
1994. So that wasn't actually the fish that we collected then. That was some other fish. Okay, so well, I was able to get the first, and that first group of fish were Heiko Blair had collected those fish, and they were around for several years, and then I lost mine, and then we looked at the fish, tried to get them back commercially, and they were just in horrible shape. They had started crossing them with everything, and that was our second trip. We had decided we were going to go after praecox, so we collected
"Hmm,
praecox from Pagai, and those
so
are
cool."
just those are yes. There's something cool about beautiful diamond blue and red fish that you pull them out with the net, and
Yeah,
you really are screaming like a little kid going, oh, look at these things, look at these things. It was just
yeah,
fantastic.
that's
What was so cool about that, they actually the bathing, we found out later, the bathing stream where they told us where the men could go bathe, it was a little shallow 6-inch stream with tannin waters in it. You're sitting there kneeling down trying to soap off and everything, and you're looking between your toes, all these little praecox were swimming between our toes. And the bigger creek that we were in earlier in the day, we always were catching was this big chiller Athena. They were beautiful too, but they weren't the praecox. And we
mhm,
were really disappointed because we knew they were at this particular village. And there was you know how when you get flooded areas, this was a nice gravel stream, but when you get flooded areas, you'll get a scour out, and there was this pond sitting all by itself, and it was right in front of this little mud runoff.
mhm.
And I was looking at that, and my friend Johannes Graf was going, well, let's collect in there. And it did look real good, and it was about 20 foot long and about 5 foot wide. And I'm going, do we really want to get in there? It's like kind of said, yeah, okay, we'll do, okay, whatever,
Have a
let's
say
go ahead and
through it
do
at
it.
least.
And we pulled I don't know, probably 150 praecox out of that thing. So it's like cool. I've been looking for these things all over, and all of a sudden there they were right in front of us. So
They were
that was,
trapped too, huh?
yeah, yeah, that was a nice trip. So
That's nice when
you
you're not even
pull out.
impacting the local population at all.
Yep. Well, they were all going to die in that little pool
Exactly.
anyway. So, what you always want to do, you want to bring back about 10 for yourself, and you take the big ones. If you've got a known unknown fish, you want to take the biggest one and pickle it. Put it in alcohol and then take pictures of it. If that's
Mhm.
your holotype, and then you want to bring back the smallest as possible because the big ones don't travel very well. So,
Right, right. They
yeah,
produce more ammonia in the bag, and
yeah,
just
absolutely,
they just
yeah,
adapt. I just found the bigger fish don't adapt as well
yeah,
to changing water parameters when you just even from tank to tank.
yeah.
An older fish will pass. I don't see any more questions, Gary. We're coming up on 30 minutes. A couple quick questions for you, Gary. Cubs or Cardinals?
If I said Cubs, I'd be in trouble. I'd be a liar, but certainly Cardinals.
I'm having I'm also asking that because I'm surrounded by Cubs fans right now. My father-in-law is
Uh-oh.
visiting, and my wife
Uh-oh.
is a Cubs fan as well. Uh, boo. And then cats or dogs?
I like them both. I grew up with dogs, and my brothers both had yellow labs, so those were enjoyable. I had a black lab growing up, but right now I've got 3 cats, so I'm surrounded with blue-eyed cats.
Yes, your cats are very sweet too. All right, last question: birds or rodents?
Oh, birds, definitely. I've got hawks in the backyard that come every year, and we have a bird feeder for the birds. We feed the birds. The Cooper hawks come down and swoop down and grab something, but I always enjoy that. Rodents, I'm not too wild about. I when I think of rodents, I think of rats, but
Right.
certainly, and my cats certainly love to chase the voles
Yep.
around the yard, so
Yep.
they get out under supervision in the yard with me, but they'll also, a vole looks like a little tiny mouse with a pointed nose. All of a sudden, they'll be flinging a vole about 2 foot in the air because they try to bite the cats. Cats have fun with it. So I
We
like.
got two
Yeah,
questions that came in here
okay.
right at the end.
Okay.
Jordan Hounsel wants to know if you go anywhere in Papua, which fish would be highest on your list to recollect? Is there one that
Recollect.
got away for you from you?
Oh, that would be a Glossolepis ligidae. So I'll be talking about that actually in Wapoga. Wapoga was an incredibly expensive and an incredibly difficult trip to pull off. We had to
Glossolepis
go
what?
Glossolepis ligidae. It's named for a famous person who from the Angfa group, and he's I think he's a doctor also.
Is it
So I
kind
might
of
I might
bluish?
um it it's you know what, it's hard to say because the ones we were catching were very very small, and they all end up dying, and you can see pictures under the original description. I think Jerry Allen described that one also, and they looked really cool. Yep, there you go. And it's like, yeah, but nobody actually really brought those back alive. They got put into those were done in the glass tank collecting trip, and nobody ever really got to see what they look like.
Yeah, it looks
So
like there's just one picture that's kind of been recycled several times
yeah, yeah, I
here.
would have liked to brought back that fish, and there is another fish there that
Here.
it escapes my mind right at the moment that we also lost there, but
Mhm.
it was a great trip, and it'd be fun to get there. They're putting more and more roads in there, so eventually maybe we'll be able to drive there. They're getting closer. They're still about, I think, 50 or 100 miles away from that region. The problem with the roads is that every time they put in the road, the gold miners come in, or the palm oil plantations go in, and they dump the gold miners dump in their mercury, and the palm oil guys dump in their pesticides, so the rivers go to hell pretty quickly after that. So yeah.
You're very welcome, Jordan. Alfredo Villarreal says, tips on breeding wonder killies.
Yeah, put them in the toilet and flush them, and then get yourself rainbow fish. Sorry, man, you can't ask me for that. Killer fish are easy. Just have to put a lid on the tank, feed them lots of food, and get females, because most of the time all they have is males in there.
I need a
Now, now,
censor button.
okay. Hey, no, come on. Somebody asked me about cichlids, and I'll give you the same question.
Oh, that's funny. But yes, I will tell you. I believe they are mop spawners.
Sure.
And so if you just get like a little bit of you want acrylic yarn so it doesn't rot in your tank. But if you get acrylic yarn, take like a wine cork and wrap it around the cork, like basically you take a bunch of loops, have them out in one string. Take your yarn, wrap it over the cork here, kind of. Where's my camera? Kind of like this, and then tie it at the bottom so that you've got a little cork that floats and the yarn can hang down. That will be your mop there, and as long as you feed them well, they'll spawn for you, and you can pull the mop out and hatch them in a different tank.
Yeah. Just remember to put a very, very tight lid on the tank.
Yes,
You don't want to have a hang on the back filter or any of that stuff, because that gives you a 1 inch hole. That's all they need to jump out, and
very,
they're
very
they're
accurate jumpers too.
airborne. Yep.
Yeah. Let's see. We got coming in from
Oh, hey, Roy. This is
yeah.
Seattle Roy. Hi, Roy.
Roy wants to know if you've made any recent trips to Papua in the last
Oh,
couple of
oh,
years.
yes, I have, Roy. If you look on some of the Facebook Live pages, you'll see the fish Kali Taiwa. That's the most amazing rainbow fish I've ever seen. It's red, white, and blue. It's just a fantastic fish with a brilliant ruby red tail. And I'll show that at the end of my talk, but I'm not talking about that until we all get our vaccines and I can go live. maybe Seattle will be the first group to take me up on that. But we brought back 4 commercial fish from that collection. So, or from that one trip in 2019. So it was fantastic. You talk about that trip. The one trip we went down by ferry because there was no planes for 3 days. So we took a ferry for a day and a half to to save an extra day and a half. On the way back, we took a 4-wheel drive that there was about a 200-yard patch of mud. I mean, 3 foot deep of mud. We got stuck, but fortunately somebody threw a rope to us and pulled us out. But that was a great trip. But to get Chitawa, we got ourselves in a 14-foot wooden boat with twin outboards on the back. Ran over the ocean until we got to it, alongside of the island. But the waves were so high. Normally I'm going, oh, you're a wussy if you're wearing a life preserver. But we all had our life preservers on, and we had a second one hand by, and you dare not let go of the seat because it was bouncing so hard. So we finally got to that village, and then the only truck in town was this giant dump truck. So we felt like Hannibal on top of the elephant going to get this fish. And then once we got them, they were just awesome. They were prettier than anything we had ever even thought about. So, but we're going to have to wait until everybody gets the vaccine to talk about that. But I will talk about getting the striped praecox from Wapoga and the beautiful yellow alani. That's our talk for Thursday.
Yes, so make sure you guys come back Thursday evening at 7:30 is our start. Gary's gonna be talking to us about his recent trip and how long ago was that trip that you're talking about?
Oh, that was quite a while ago. That was 2012. So
Okay,
nice. That was trip number 4. So we try to do one every 2 years if possible. It takes almost 2 years to save up enough money. My wife won't let me take it out of the retirement fund. She said it's got to come out of your fish money. So when I say, hey, I want $20 for those fish or $30 for those fish, it's because that's got to pay for the next trip. Got to pay for the next trip.
That's right. We got several. So as soon as I said we got to go, we get a flood of questions naturally. All right, so we've got. We'll do this one first. It's a yes or no question. Jaime Cox Garcia wants to know, or maybe Jamie. Sorry if I called you Jaime there. Brett Garcia. Oh, so it's different person, but then the name. Brett Garcia wants to know: are Sunamugil subfamily considered a rainbow fish?
No, they're not. They're considered blue eyes.
Blue
So
eyes.
you'll see that if you go to the Facebook page Rainbow Fish Live, if you say they're rainbow fish, Peter Unmack, who's my DNA guy, will sit there and give you he'll ring me a new one.
Nice. Another
But
question.
they're fun too.
Wally Kern back again. Wally wants to know, Gary, name 2 fish that you consider underrated in the hobby, not difficult to keep or breed, but not kept as much as they should be kept. Thanks.
Whew, that's a hard one to say. There's an awful lot of rainbows. That's sort of like Sophie's Choice and underrated ones. Certainly the Niagara's fish is a nice fish, and that is, you'll see that on Aquabid. That's a slender rainbow fish. Some of the pictures aren't as good as they should be. So that's certainly a nice fish. Man, what other fish are out there? There's just a lot. There's so many fish. It's hard to keep track of them. Everybody wants the Bozemanines, the bright red ones, and that stuff. But there really are a lot of other rainbow fish. I think that's really almost impossible to tell. Sex laniata is a great fish if you can find that one. That's out there too.
I'm personally in love. I just got some of these recently from Mike Helwig. I'm going to show my screen. I just got some of these. I not 100%. Microdevario cubatai, I believe. But these little guys are amazing.
Oh, okay. Not rainbows.
No, not rainbows. But he said that these guys were pretty easy to spawn. So I'm looking forward to spawning them, and I will keep you all posted on my success. But they're very gorgeous fish. They look very similar to these photos too.
Micro Resboria, did you say?
Yeah, Microdevario.
Microdevario. Okay, so from the from the Danio type group then. Okay.
Yeah. All right. We have a big question here. Facebook user wants to know, what's the timeline to breeding Bosemani from hatching 2 weeks from hatching to 2 to 3 weeks. I breed them successfully, grew them out for a year. Now I get fry from them. I just don't seem to get them to stay alive after 2 to 3 weeks. They start disappearing. I start them with golden pearls and switch them to BBS. Any thoughts? So how to make that transition from basically their egg sacs to getting them to eat food.
Yeah, well, first of all, rainbow fish really don't have egg sacs. I mean, that's the one thing that when I go back to doing cichlids, I have to remind myself, oh, don't feed for 3 days. With rainbow fish, you do have to feed them right away. Um,
Hmm.
the other thing is if you don't have the fish warm enough, it seems like they go away pretty quickly. So
Hmm.
I
What's
I try to hatch them at 80 to 82 degrees, and then keep those fry at about 82 degrees for a while.
it's
Um,
very warm, yeah.
the idea is that or my thought process, this is a theory, it's not a fact, but if you keep them warm they grow up quicker and you get them to that baby brine shrimp size quicker, and I that's what I try to do. Years ago Jerry Allen talked about wanamensis in the lake, and he was in the shallows of the water, and he said it was like 90 degrees and it was very very warm, and it's chock-a-block, an Australian term, full of all these little baby fry, and the thought went off, hey, I should keep these things warmer, because you keep them warmer, they grow faster.
Yeah.
Bozemanii is one of the slowest growing rainbow fish out there. I don't grow it all that often because they grow so slow, but it takes probably 2 years for them to reach full size. They're very beautiful, but they're just very very slow growers.
Hmm.
Maybe that's what your problem is. Also, some people are kind of lazy about separating brine shrimp eggs from the brine shrimp. I've heard killifish people say if they, some of their fish get too many brine shrimp eggs, um, they can have problems. I usually settle them out. I put a light on one side of my brine shrimp tank as I'm settling them out, and I only siphon out as much of the orange stuff as possible and leave
Hmm.
most of the brown stuff. It's not perfect, but if you're really really lazy about it and just taking the whole thing and eggs and
Right.
all, then your fish are going to be eating more eggs because they are rainbow fish and they're not real bright. So remember that comment to begin with.
Excellent.
Hope that
I
helps.
hope that helps. Yes. Good luck to you, man. All right, guys. That is a wrap. Gary, awesome talking to you as always, man. And I will catch you on Thursday.
Okay, see you guys all on Thursday. Tell your friends, and see if we can get 200 people here, huh?
Wow, that would be nice. All right, guys,
Thanks.
don't forget to
Okay,
like and subscribe if you haven't, and we will see you guys Thursday. Bye.
okay, thanks. Bye.